Thank you for joining us on today's video. Today's video, we're going to have a Halloween theme. We're going to do some tasty science chemistry today with some Halloween treats. We're going to make some pumpkin muffins, some sugar cookies, and some sugar skulls, and we're going to make some homemade icing to make sure we can decorate them and have a great time, because science is always better when it's tasty. Thank you for joining, and I hope you enjoy our video. For today's video, some things you're going to need. If you're going to make the pumpkin muffin bread that I'm making, it definitely helps to have a pumpkin mold like this. And definitely make sure you have your pumpkin mix and whatever green ingredients you need for your pumpkin mix. For my pumpkin mix, it calls for some canola oil, half a cup. It also calls for 2/3 cup of milk, 2 eggs, and 3 softened sticks of butter. So make sure whatever mix you get, you can go ahead and purchase that and have whatever ingredients that it calls for. For my icing, it's definitely easier to have it made in a KitchenAid mixer. If you don't have that, you can use a bowl and whisk, but the mixer will definitely help. For this, you're going to want to have some powdered sugar. I am using about 5 cups. You're going to want about a cup of white chocolate, about 4 tablespoons of cream or milk. You can use milk as well. And if you want any kind of vanilla or almond extract to use some extra flavoring. For our sugar skulls, this is actually very simple. You're going to want about a tablespoon of water, about a tablespoon of meringue powder, and 4 cups of sugar. Over here for our cookie mix, again, just buy whatever cookie mix you like, or if you have a homemade recipe, you can always use that as well. For my mix, I have the mix here. It calls for 1 egg and 1 stick of butter. For the end of it, if you have any sprinkles, any food dyes you'd like to use to help make the colors for your icings or for decorating your cookies, definitely feel free to have those as well. You'll want at least 1 cookie sheet. I'm going to probably use 2. And some bowls to make sure that you have all of your ingredients. Well, let's get started. So let's start with our muffin mix, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to work with my 2 eggs. Now that we have our eggs, we can whisk them together. And as I whisk them, I'm not really making a new substance. I'm just blending the egg up. This isn't a chemical change or anything. It's just me whisking the eggs together. And I'm just going to whisk them together. As I whisk the eggs, you can tell that this is just a physical change. It hasn't changed into something new yet, but I am whisking them together. While I'm whisking it, I'm going to follow the directions from my packaging mix. I'm going to put in my half cup of oil and my 2/3 cup of milk. Once I've mixed those in, I'm going to go ahead and mix in my mix. So before I put in my mix, let's talk about it. So we know that this mix has multiple different powders in it. So this is still a mixture. So when we mix powders together, that's just a physical change. There's nothing new that was created. It's still just this dry mix. But we're about to turn this together to make a batter. So as I mix these, I'm going to make my batter. So now that I have my batter all mixed up, and it is just those 2 mixtures that we did, the mixture that had the batter mix and the mixture that had the liquid ingredients as well. Make sure you have your muffin tin or your pumpkin mold ready to go. And once you have that ready, spray it down if you need to, and you can start pouring in your batter. Now as I'm pouring it, you can see that it's filling in the shape. This is another example of a physical change. It hasn't changed anything yet, it's just filling its container. So a change in shape is another example of a physical change. While you're doing this, make sure you don't overflow them. They will rise some, so you don't want to overfill your pumpkin molds or your muffin tins, whatever you're choosing to use. You want to make sure that you fill it enough, but don't go too crazy. Once you've got yours filled up, you can go ahead and clean any excess mix that you might have dripped over. And once you're done with that, You can put it in the oven at 350 degrees or whatever your muffin mix suggests to bake it. And we'll be looking at those physical and chemical changes as they bake. Let's put them in the oven. Look at these. These have escaped the oven. We have taken these out of the oven and they have beautiful color change. And you can see how it's getting darker around the edges for sure. You can see some little pockets of gas. To make sure that they're ready for eating, just take a toothpick. If it comes out clean, then your muffins or breads are ready. So once you know that they're ready and you are ready to move to the next step, let these cool off and then we can make our icing while we wait. All right guys, so we're gonna start with our icing, and today I'm gonna make a white chocolate buttercream icing. So make sure you have your bowl of white chocolate chips. You want at least a cup of white chocolate chips, and we're gonna go ahead and put it in the microwave for about 15 seconds. After you've done it for 15 seconds, let it melt a little bit, and then you're gonna stir it up, put it in for another 15 seconds, and then keep repeating that process until it's nice and melted. So when you're done melting your chocolate, it should look something like this. At this point, we went from solid chocolate to now what we have is melted chocolate. This state of matter change, or melting, is just a physical change. It's still chocolate. It didn't become a new substance. It's just now in a different state of matter. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start the next step of our icing while it cools down. We're going to take our 3 sticks of softened butter and we're going to put them in our mixer. Again, it is much simpler if you have a mixer, but if you don't have a KitchenAid mixer, you can use just a beater or whisk it. But again, it's much easier with a beater or a whisk attachment on a KitchenAid. So in our next step of making our icing, we're going to take our 3 sticks of softened butter and we're going to put it in our mixer. So once it's ready in your mixer and you have your whisk attachment or you have your beater ready, you're going to go ahead and start beating your softened butter. As you're stirring your butter with your mixer, you're going to go ahead and start adding your powdered sugar to it as it's stirring. A little bit at a time. You can do about a cup at a time. Right now I'm using about a 1/3 cup measuring spoon to get there, but that is up to you. While it's going, and once it's kind of got a good little consistency, you're going to pour in your cream or milk, whichever one you chose. You can pour in your white chocolate. Be careful though, you don't want it to get stuck or caught. And when ready, you can go ahead and add about a tablespoon of vanilla. And give that a good mix for a little while. So you want to make sure that you have it mixing until it's nice, smooth, and creamy. This could be about 4 minutes, maybe a little longer, depending on how you're mixing it and what you're using. But you can see this beautiful frosting texture. You want it to be nice and smooth and creamy before you start working with it. Now, make sure that all of your baked goods are cool before you start doing that. Otherwise, it'll just melt. Now that our icing is done, we're going to go ahead and dye some of it so that we can have some different colors on our baked treats. So the first one I'm going to do is I'm going to separate so I can have some regular white still on the side. I also want to have a little bit so I can make some green, and a lot of bit so I can make some orange, because you know we're doing some Halloween treats, so we want to have some good fall color orange. To make the orange, I'm just going to get some red dye and some yellow dye. I'm going to mix it with this beautiful white icing. We're going to see if we can make a gorgeous pumpkin orange out of it. And you can just stir this in a bowl. And as you can see, it's already starting to kind of start there. And mine's looking a little pink right now, so I'm probably going to add some more yellow to it, because I don't really want a pink pumpkin. but y'all can play with your food dyes to make them the color that you want. Now to make my green one, I'm just gonna put some drops of green food coloring into my icing, mix that up just like I did to make my orange, and we'll be good to start decorating. So here are my finished icings. I've got my green, my orange, and my white, and I'm ready to start decorating. All right, guys, while we wait for our pumpkin bread muffin mix to work, we're gonna go ahead and start our cookies next. So get your cookie stuff ready. Let's start with our egg for our cookie mix. Whisk those eggs together for our batter. So now that we've gotten our egg ready, we have our mix ready. Remember, this is still a physical change because whether you make it homemade or you get the powder mix in a box, it's just some powders mixed together. So this has been a physical change to make that mix. Let's go ahead and take in our scrambled egg, throw it in there. Take our softened butter, put it in there, and we're gonna mix it together. Now, since this is softened butter and not melted butter, it might take you a little while to mix it, but go ahead and start blending. If stirring it isn't working very well for you, you can also always get some gloves on and blend it together like we ended up doing for our dough. And once your dough has formed and it makes a pretty good ball of dough, you can go ahead and start separating it onto your cookie sheet. On my cookie sheet, I did use parchment paper. This will help reduce the mess and keep everything clean. Put some small cookie dough balls on your cookie sheet. Remember that these guys will expand, so you don't want them to be too close to each other, or you won't really have as many cookies as you want. You'll just have a giant cookie. Now, if that's what you want, then go for it. But I want more than one cookie. I want to be able to enjoy my cookies for a good amount of time. So remember, since we used an egg in this, this is not safe to eat until you baked it. So please do not eat this cookie dough until after it is baked. So now that we have our cookies ready, you can kind of have a mental picture of what they look like, what they feel like, the color, and everything like that. If you're like me and you made cookie mixes that will make plenty of cookies, you might use 2 baking sheets, but it depends on how much your mix is and how big your cookies are going to be. So let's go ahead and put these in the oven for about 7 to 9 minutes. So now that we've taken our cookies out of the oven, we can definitely see some color changes. You can see that light brown and golden look that the cookies had from that white sugar cookie mix. So we do see a color change as an indication of a chemical change. That means it's no longer batter, but now it's delicious cookie ready to eat and decorate. And start with our sugar skulls. So these are technically edible, but they're just not going to taste very good. So this is more for decorative purposes and for fun holiday activities. So what we're going to do is we have our sugar and we have some meringue powder. So I'm going to mix that meringue powder really good. And I'm going to make sure that it blends well with the sugar. Now once I've done that, I'm going to put in some water. So you can either do this just by hand or you can put some gloves on there. I'm just going to do it by hand. But again, make sure it mixes pretty well. You don't want it to have a whole lot of lumps like mine has right now. You want it to be a nice sand-like consistency. And this being just a mixture, and there's been no chemical changes yet. Still a physical changes. Nothing's really changed yet. You can tell that they're just the same white powders. There's been no color change, no indicators of any kind of chemical change happening. Just a mixture of the powders. Now that it's mostly a beach-like consistency like sand, I'm going to go ahead and put in my water. I'm going to start kind of mixing it. I kind of want it to be like wet sand. So once you've moistened your mixture and it's nice and it feels kind of like wet sand, you can go ahead and start using your sand, or your, in this case, sugar skulls, into your molds. Now, again, there haven't been any chemical changes. This has only been physical changes. It's changing the shape, it's putting two different things together, but nothing new has really been made. I'm really just shaping it and molding it in a mixture. Now, once you've put it into the molds and you made sure they're nice and tight, we should be able to transfer them out after. Here are our sugar skulls, and again, we just packed them in here. We didn't really have any chemical changes happen. It was a physical change where we just changed the shape of our mixture. You can let these sit for a little while and harden. If you want to decorate them after, you can decorate them with icing, with sprinkles, however you want to do that later, but just make sure that they have time to rest and harden for a few hours. Again, this is a great physical change, but we didn't see any chemical changes here, but it's a great way to celebrate with Day of the Dead and Halloween coming up. Well, thank you for doing this, and we're going to go ahead and look at our results. Thank you for joining today. I hope you guys had a fun time when doing some more science and chemistry together. I hope that your cookies and your muffins and your sugar skulls came out fantastic and you had a lot of fun with our science. Thank you for joining, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and join me next time.